All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors, Baruch Hashem, for this last daf of Moed Katan. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all the Shurim and Drashos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Reuven Ben Betzalel and Dinah Bas Reb Dov. To thank Art and Sherry Miller for dedicating all of the Shurim and Drashos this month in memory of Art's brother, Richard Miller, Reuven Ben Betzalel, and to thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Ayal Steinberg, for the refuah sheleimah of Shulamis Bas Susha. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all Chole Yisrael will have the completed enduring refuah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and the families ein chama. And I will say with that, let us begin. So Baruch Hashem, we have the great zichus today to complete Maseches Moed Katan. Today's daf is Chav Tes 29, last daf Moed Katan. We are picking up on the top of Chav Tes on the days 28b at the Mishnah. So I'll say, not so much to do today, a lot of very beautiful Gemara today. We'll have the opportunity to really delve into it. So it says the Mishnah, Noshim b'moed ma'anos v'alom etapos. So I'll say we've seen this Mishnah actually quoted a number of times throughout the Masechta, actually throughout the last two prakim. So women on Chalamayid, ma'anos avalom etapos. So we'll say we're going to get into the definitions of ma'anos and metapchos already. We've already spoken about this. Ma'anos literally again is like a wailing or a crying out. Metapchos means like a clapping of the hands. Again, we'll define it. The point over here is that on Chalamayid there is a cap or a limitation on the external displays of mourning. So Nashim Moed, women on Chalamayid, Manos Halam Metapchos. So they can go ahead and wail, right? They can go ahead and cry out, but ultimately, again, they cannot clap their hands in grief. Rabbi Shmuel says, Hasmuchos Lamita Metapchos. Ultimately, again, those who are right next to the funeral bier, they have the ability even to go ahead and clap their hands in grief. But Rashi Chadashim, Bechanukah Ubepurim. Similarly, again, I will say, so once we're talking about days or times in which one must diminish their external displays of mourning, so too again on Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, Ma'anos, Umetapchos. They are permitted to go ahead and call out, cry out, and Metapchos, as well as go ahead and clap their hands in grief. Bazeh ubazeh, but both again on Chalamayid, as well as on Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, and Purim, Lo Mekonenos. They're not Mekonenos. Now again, we'll define all of these. Mekonenos also sounds like a wailing or a crying out. We'll define the difference in just a moment. Nikbar Ames, once the dead is buried, Lo Ma'anos v'lo Metapchos. Good. So says the Gemara, Ezehu Inui. So what's Ma'anos? When we say Ma'anos, what does Ma'anos mean? What's Inui? Shekulon Onos Ka'achos. So we'll say, interesting enough, the lashon of Ma'anos is crying out, but everyone crying out together. Crying out in unison. So what's Mekonenos? Kina, Sha'achos Medaberes, V'kulon Onos Achareha. Kina sounds more like what? Responsive mourning, or responsive wailing. Shneimar, V'lamdena b'nosechem nei, V'isha ru'usa kina, V'alo asid lavo. We'll say the last Mishnah Masechta ends so beautifully. We've been focused so much on death, focused so much on loss. So the last Mishnah in the Masechta wants to end off in a positive note. Avala asid lavo. But in the future, hu omer bila hamaves lanetzach umacha Hashem Elokim dima me'al kol panim. Quotes over here the pasuk from Mishael that reference to in the future, bila hamaves lanetzach, death will be swallowed up forever. Umacha Hashem Elokim dima me'al kol panim, and Hashem will go ahead and erase every tear from every cheek. So a very, very beautiful, almost like anticipatory tefillah that in Meretz Hashem death will be swallowed up. Now I will say, what exactly that means is very interesting. The notion of death is a fascinating one. The Medrash says at the end of Ma'aseh Bereishis, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov ma'od. Hashem saw everything that He did and it was very good. What was very good? The Medrash says, Zeu Hamisa. This refers ultimately again to death. This refers to death, right? That what Hashem made was very good was death. So we'll say, what's the pshat? That ultimately, again, everything, that death was very good. So we'll say, interestingly enough, what's the pshat? We wouldn't normally associate death as being something that's very good. So the commentaries explain, that I will say death is one of the greatest gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. Because think about it for just a moment. Without death, what's the impetus to accomplish? Without death, what's the impetus to say, I got to get my act together, right? If we were immortal, can you imagine what our lives would look like? We would live in a constant, ongoing state of disrepair. Because why should I take care of the things I have to take care of? Why should I fix myself? Why should I fix my life? There's plenty of time. Death is tov moed, because I know one simple thing. I'm going to die. It's an absolute surety. The only shayla is when. And I don't know when. I don't know whether I'll be given the gift of old age, not be given the gift of old age. So because I don't know when I'm going to leave this world, I better get everything in order now. So what does it mean when Yeshayahu says that when Mashiach comes, death is going to be swallowed up forever? So again, many of the Mefarshim on the Pesukim say that what it means is tragic death. Tragic death, what we look at as maybe premature death, what we look at as sad death. In other words, people will die because death is part of the fabric of the human condition, an absolute necessity for life accomplishment. But perhaps these tragic elements of death will be swallowed up when Mashiach comes. Just a very, very important yesod. And I will say a very important idea as to how we're supposed to look at death. In Judaism, it's an interesting, Rav Shlomo Hirsch says that, if you notice, one of the interesting things is, by churches, you'll often find this, that one thing you'll find attached to almost every single church is a cemetery. Yet by shuls, you never find that. You do find it in Europe. In Europe, you find shuls, right? You find cemeteries attached to shuls, but that's often for a different reason. That's often because there was limitations on Jewish ownership of land. So Jews were allocated a particular amount of land, so you had to maximize it for everything. Rav Hirsch says, why is it that we don't have cemeteries attached to our shuls? And he says, because Judaism is a life-affirming religion. Because we don't look forward to death. We accept death, we embrace death, but we don't actively look forward to it. Other religions ultimately look forward to death because, again, they're promised this, they're promised that. This world is terrible, that world is wonderful. We believe in an olam haba, but at the end of the day, we recognize that the essence of where we have the opportunity to make a difference is in olam hazeh. But death is an incredibly important part of life. We don't run from it, we don't ignore it. We accept it, we embrace it, and we utilize the knowledge of it to live a more impactful life in this world. This life comes to an end, and we don't know when. We must make the most of it and do what we need to do now. Says the Gemara. So my Amr, so we'll say the Gemara talks about, again, the fact that the women would eulogize. What would they say? This is beautiful. So the Gemara says, Amarav, Vaila Azla, Vaila Chavila. So I'll say it's interesting. So apparently there used to be like some common things that people would say at Levayas. Common things, especially again, these the mourning women, the wailing women. What would they say? So Rav said, Vaila Azla, Vaila Chavila. So Vaila Azla literally means woe. Vai is like oi. Woe to the one who is leaving. Vaila Chavila. So we'll say, it's interesting. If you take a look at the Rabbeinu Hananel, you don't have to look it up, I'll read it to you. But Rabbeinu Hananel on the bottom says like this. He says, Perish Nashi Dishchensev Hayu Chachamos, V'Amanas Amos Oila Holech. So ultimately, again, woe to the one who is going. Going, of course, a reference to death. And now listen to this. What's Chavila? So the Rabbeinu Hananel says that Chavila is a lashon of mashkon, of collateral. Vaila azla, vaila chavila. Woe to the one who is leaving. Woe to the one who must return his collateral. So we'll say, what's the collateral? The collateral is the neshama. Right? My soul is collateralized. Ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives it to me, but I have an obligation to go ahead and return it. So what's death? Death is a returning of the collateral, ultimately again to the Ribono Shel Olam. So I'll say, what an incredible yisod. My life is on loan. My life is on loan. My soul is collateral. My soul is collateral from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Vaila Azla, Vaila Chavila. Vamarava, Nashi Deshchensiv, the women of Shchensiv, which was a place, what would they say? They would say, Good Garma Mikacha, the Nimtin Maya La'antichi. So we'll say, they would make this. Now, it's interesting. Good Garma Mikacha literally means the bone is cut from the tooth. But Rashi says there's something interesting. Rashi says, Good Garma Mitacha Naflu Halechayim. The cheeks have fallen. So I will say this is a reference to something really amazing if you think about it. When a person passes away, the halacha is that if their mouth is open, you're supposed to try to close the mouth. But sometimes you can't. Not because of rigor mortis, just sometimes you can't, just because the way the muscles are, the mouth doesn't close. So I'll say, how incredible is it that sometimes a person in life, it's fascinating. We control so much when we're alive. We control so much. The important things, not a lot of things I don't control, but I control so many things when I'm alive. I control the kind of person I'm going to be. I control my reactions to certain things. I control how I'm going to utilize my time. And death comes, and naflu, again, they say, good gara mikacha. The cheeks go ahead and fall, which means, again, the mouth opens, and I can't even close it. What a contrast. What a contrast. One moment of life I'm in control of so much, and then again in the next moment I control nothing. Again, the Pashup Pshat, the good Gara Mikacha, the Marsha says over here, again, this is getting smaller. Good Gara Mikacha, the Marsha says, so good. So Rashi says again, the cheeks open, but again, it literally means the bone is cut from the tooth, the Nimti Ma'ila Tuchi, which means the water goes back into the kettle. Now, what's the pshat that the water goes back into the kettle? Rashi says, Kilomar, Hadri Maya Lamafrea Klapi Mala. So I'll say, see, normally what happens? Where does the water go? The water goes from the kettle into the cup. The water going back into the kettle represents the water returning to the source. So, of course, a metaphor for death. Ultimately, again, the neshama, the soul, returning back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'amar Rava, Nashi d'Shchensiv Amran, the women of Shchensiv would say, Atuf v'kasu turi, so the mountains should wrap themselves, debar rami ubar rav revihu. For this man was a great man who was returning his neshama to his maker. So again, the Marsha will say, I'll mention, you'll take a look in the back, but the Marsha has a whole interpretation for each of these statements. For here he says as follows. Here he says, Atuf v'kasu, he says, Perish ba'aruch ba'ataf ke'adama omer laharim, his atvu v'his kasu b'mabushim na'im, ki zeh ha'ish habali kavar etzlechem ben gedolim. Mountains, clothe yourself, put on your special garment, for a special and holy man is coming to be buried by you. So again, mountains, prepare yourself to accept the body of this person. Bama Rava said, Nashi d'Shchensiv Amran, Shiul itztila demilsa, lebarchorin d'shalimu zavdei. We'll say also again, these expressions are fascinating. So I'll tell you the literal translation, and then I'll quote you from the Marsha. So the Marsha says as follows. The Marsha says literally again, Shil itzla demilsa. The coffin is a fine robe of silk for the individual, for the ben chorin, for the free man, the shalimu zavde, who has used up, Rashi says, shekalulo mizonosav, who has used up his provisions and now is poor. What does this mean? So again, the Marsha says, he says, Ve'odnir lefarish kepashtei, deba'ani mamishemes aidi, v'shayule itztala demilsa lemes letachrichov. Va'amr lebarchorin asa, so again, Marsha gives two interpretations. Pasha Pshat, again, we only have, this is not the whole daf, by the way, just a couple of lines, but it's just interesting, just to kind of see how they would give these eulogies. So literally, so Marsha gives two interpretations. Interpretation number one, he says, is that when a person dies, the only cloak, right? We'll say when I'm alive, a person might wear all kinds of fancy clothing, fancy cloaks, right? When you die, what's your cloak? What's your fancy clothing? It's the coffin. The coffin is what you have in which to go ahead and clothe yourself. And how do they call a person who dies is a ben chorin. Ben chorin, he's free. We'll say free means free from a lot of things. It means free from mitzvahs, free from gashmis, free from everything. Dishalimu zavdei. And what do you take with you to the grave? So the Marsha says the Pasha Pshat over here seems to be that no matter what wealth you amass in life, you take nothing with you. The cloak you take ultimately again is your casket. And no matter what provisions, so to speak, you've acquired in life, nothing comes with you to the grave. Amar Rava says, Nashi d'Shchensiv Amran, Rohit v'nafil ama abra, v'azufsa Yosef. He ran, he fell at the crossroads, the Azufsa Yazif, and he borrowed money. Okay, what does this mean? So the Maharsha again says over here, Rohit Viratz Kol Yamav Achar Michya. So it's a very profound idea. This person, this is what they would eulogize. Person ran after his parnasa his entire life. Viata, and now nafal ama'abra b'makom ma'abaris me'olam hazeh li'olam haba. And now he has fallen at the crossroads. The crossroads represent the crossroads between this world and the next. V'ayuse Yosef v'chov shalova adayin alav. And yet he still has to repay his debts. So I will say, you notice, by the way, a theme. The theme being that no matter what you accomplish in the material world, you can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. So don't allow, we shall be zocheh to material success, but don't allow material success to be the determinant of your life success. That might be a chelik of your life success in this world, but none of that comes with you to the world to come. So we'll say, listen to this lesson. Nofel, right? Sorry, this guy spent his life running. Now we'll say, remember again, I'll also point out that these eulogies, I don't want to use the word like canned eulogies, but they were the type of things that people said at Levias in general because they weren't necessarily specific about the person who passed away, but rather were what? Were more descriptive of the human condition. That how do people spend lives? People spend lives running. We run after our parnasa. We have to. V'nafal ama'abra, and then we fall at the crossroads. The crossroads representing, again, the crossroads between this world and the next. And now is when we have to repay the true debt. And we'll say, what's the true debt? That's the debt that we have to give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu after 120. He gave us in advance. Right? What was the advance? The advance was life. The advance was an neshama. Now I have to come back to Olam Haba and pay the debt. And hopefully I can make good on that which I owe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Amar Rava. Rava says, Nashi Dishchensiv Amran. The women of Shchensiv say, Achana Tagri. So my brothers, merchants, azab zogi mivdeku. The nest is going to be checked. So the Maharsha says over here, the nest represents again where you accumulate your life actions. So my brothers, my merchants, right, everyone in life, after 120, the Ribbon Shel Olam checks what's in the nest. Incredible. Death is death. Umarin chibulaya. But ultimately, again, sometimes the variable is how much you have to suffer. Meaning, in other words, we'll say death is part of the human condition. Can't avoid it. What we sometimes can avoid in life is how much suffering is visited upon us. And again, the Maharsha points out over here, because there are two different types of suffering, and this is very profound. Two different types of suffering. There's suffering that is visited upon us, and there's suffering we visit upon ourselves. And I will say this is an incredible yisod. That certain types of suffering I can't avoid, right? Illness, different things in life, those are things that happen to me. But how often do we bring things upon ourselves because of bad decisions we make in life? So here the Nashid Dishchensiv said, Mosa ki Mosa, death is death. Everyone dies. Umarin chibulaya, but the real variable is how much you suffer in life. Good, I will say. So that brings the end. So again, I just want to point out these particular eulogies. The reason the Gemara is quoting them over here is because they're not what we'll call mace specific, right? In other words, they're not particular eulogies that were given for particular people. These seem to be general motifs which were expressed at a levaya. We'll say, I say this often by levayas as well. And you see this in this Gemara. A levaya is a very powerful thing because it is rare in life that you get people to contemplate mortality, right? Most of us don't go through the day thinking about death, which is a good thing because we're hopefully balanced and healthy people, right? It's not healthy to be focused on death. But at the same time, when a person goes to a levaya, that's an incredible opportunity to focus on one's mortality so that one could emerge better energized to lead a more impactful life. So these eulogies or these statements that were made were general human condition statements. We run, we this, the nest, the collateral, all these different things. We're there to just get people to think about how we can live better. Incredible. Says Tanya, Hayr Emir says, Tov laleches al beis Evel. Well, is one of the most profound psukim. Shlomo says in Koheles, Tov leleches lebeis eid vel mileches lebeis mishteh. It is better to go to a house of mourning than it is to go to a house of celebration. Why? Ba'asher hu sof kol adam. For this is the end of all men. And again, the end of the pasuk is ad v'hachai yitain el libo. The living will take it to heart. So the Gemara says, Dvarim shal misa. What will the living take to heart? So we'll say the living will take to heart the entire dynamic of death. How so? Diyasped yispedune. If you eulogize people, people will eulogize you. Diyikbar yikbarune. If you bury people, people will bury you. Diyitan yitanune. If you help to lift the mace, people will help to lift you. Diyadel yidlune. Rashi says over here, if you eulogize people, people will eulogize you or lift people up through eulogy. So we'll say, V'ika da amri. Others say, Delo yidal yidlune. If you don't go ahead and raise your voice, in other words, if you don't make a public spectacle from your eulogies, in other words, you do things in a modest way, then ultimately, again, yidlune. People will go ahead and eulogize you as well. Kitov amar lacha alahina. So we'll say a very profound Gemara. The idea being that it is important to participate in giving kavod hameis, in giving honor to the dead. And when we could participate in a levaya, I will say, unfortunately, sometimes what ends up happening is, we only go to levayas or we only go to shiva homes when it's people that we know. And it's incredibly important, I often hear this from people after they sit shiva, Rachmana litzlan, they say, I now realize how important it is to go to shiva homes. Even if I don't know the person. Because, when you're the person sitting shiva, and if you're that person who they have trouble getting the minyan for, or this, that, you begin to realize that you become fully and wholly dependent on other people. Right? So the whole dynamic of death is that I can't do anything myself, right? The mace is powerless. So if people show for the levaya, they show for the levaya. People eulogize, they eulogize. People bury you, they bury you. And I will say, it's mazel for everything. Some people have enough people at their levaya to fill in the kever. Some people don't have enough people to fill in the kever. So the Gemara says over here, be part of this chesed while you're alive. Because if you do this for other people, then when your time comes, people will do it for you. So I'll say, if you notice, by the way, it's not like the most lofty Gemara, right? It's very utilitarian, but it's very, but it drives the point home, right? When you're dead, you're dependent. And if you're dependent, you need other people. How do you ensure other people will be there for you in your time of need? When you cannot do one thing for yourself, be the kind of person who is there for others in their time of need. Be there for the levaya. Be there for the kvura. Be there for the shiva home. So that when your time comes, which inevitably it does, people will be there for us as well. Incredibly profound. Tanabanan. We'll say incredible Gemara. Kishemes banav Rabbi Yishmael. When Rabbi Yishmael's sons passed away, nichnasu daled zekin lenachmo. So four elders came in to give him the chama. Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Yossi Agalili, Rabbi Loza ben Azariah, first by line Rabbi Akiva. So all of these Talmidei Chachamim came in to give Rabbi Yishmael consolation. So Rabbi Tarfon said to them, Du'u shechacham gadol. We'll say this is Rabbi Yishmael, right? Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol. So Rabbi Yishmael is a great Talmud Chacham. No, ultimately again, ubaki ba'agadus. And again, he is a baki in agadata. Al yikanes echar mikem lesoch divrei chavera. So I said, listen to this instruction. Rabbi Tarfon said, listen, if you all want to speak, that's fine. No repetition. I will say, so we've got now a bunch of rabbanim speaking, and no one's allowed to repeat anything that the other one said. Never been done in the history of the Jewish people. Right, so I'll say, so now again, you can all speak if you want to, but again, Rabbi Shmuel is a great Talmud Chacham. Don't waste your words. If you have something to say, then say it. But if somebody already said it, don't repeat it. Incredible. Don't repeat it. So Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, Vani Achar. Rabbi Akiva said, okay. They all agreed. And Rabbi Akiva said, if it's okay, I'll go last. So Pasach Rabbi Shmuel. So we'll say first, interest of Rabbi Shmuel begins. Now remember, who's Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel is the mourner. So the first person who spoke was Rabbi Shmuel. Both say this goes back to the Gemara that we saw before, that in a base avel, you don't speak until when? Until spoken to. Right? It's the aval who opens up the conversation. So therefore Rabbi Shmuel speaks first. And I will say it's such a heartbreaking thing. Va'amar, Rabu Avonosav. Clearly again, my sins have become great. Tachfu avelov. multiple mournings have overtaken me. Hitriach rabosav pam rishona ushnia. He's matriach his friend. He's referring to himself. He's matriach his rabbinic colleagues once and twice. Because remember, again, I will say, in this case over here, Rabbi Shmuel's two sons or two children. Again, I will say, if this is Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, then ultimately, again, this is the famous Maisa of his son and daughter who both died in Roman captivity. Right? Or it could be Rahman, other children. But the idea being is, Rabbi Shmuel starts off by saying, obvious, he felt that this must be a reflection of my sinful state. This must be a reflection of the terrible things that I've done to bring these calamities upon myself. So now Rabbi Tarfon speaks first. Va'amar achechem kol beis Yisrael yivku es hasreifa. Both say this is by the death of Nadav and Avihu. So Hashem says to Aaron, that you and your sons cannot mourn. Klal Yisrael will mourn. Va'achechem kol beis Yisrael yivku es hasreifa. Klal Yisrael will mourn. V'alo dvarim kal v'chomer. So this is a kal v'chomer. Uma Nadav Avihu shlo asa ela mitzvah achos. Nadav and Avihu only did one mitzvah. They both said, now the Maharsha doesn't literally mean they only says they didn't not that they only did one mitzvah. In the context of the consecration of the Mishkan, they only got to do one mitzvah. Dichsiv vayakrivu b'nei Aaron es hadam elav. Ultimately, again, they brought the blood, the sacrificial blood to Aaron. So again, Nadav and Avihu, who only got to do one mitzvah in the context of the Beis Hamikdash, were called Kedoshim. We're called holy. Or the most Rabbi Shmuel, your sons who did many mitzvahs, how kaddish, how holy they are considered to be. So I will say, so that was Rabbi Tarfon. So now Rabbi Yossi Lili then went ahead and said, Va'amar v'saptu lo kol Yisrael v'kavru also. And all of Klal Yisrael eulogized him and they buried him. We will say, who is this a reference to? This is a reference to Aviyah, the son of Yeravam ben Nevat. Right? Yeravam ben Nevat was the first king over the split Malchus of Yisrael, right? During the days of Shlomo HaMelech's son Rechavam. The kingdom of Yisrael is split into Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yisrael. So Yeravam was the first king of Malchus Yisrael, and ultimately this is a reference to his son Aviyah. So again, all of Klal Yisrael, they eulogized Aviyah and they buried him. So we'll say, what did Aviyah do? V'alo dvarim kal v'chomer, Uma Aviyah ben Yeravam shelo asa ela davar echad tov. Aviyah ben Yeravam did only one good thing in his life. T'chsiv bei yan nimtza bo davar tov. I found one good thing in Aviyah. So we'll say, you do see a similar theme in the words of comfort, which is what they're trying to tell Rabbi Yishmael is, as painful as it is that you lost your children, they accomplished so much in their short life. You see how the Navi, or the TORAH, how Tanakh, goes ahead and affords such cover to people who just accomplish one thing. Your children who accomplished many things, al achas kama v'kama. So the Gemara says, by the way, my davar tov, what's the good thing that Aviyah accomplished? So the Gemara says, well, this is actually very profound. My davar tov, Rabbi Zera b'chanina, Rabbi Chinina bar papa, chad amar shebital mishmarta va'ala l'ragel, v'chad amar shebital pardesaos shahoshe v'iravam aviv, ala dracham shelo liyalu yisrael l'ragel. So listen to this. One of the things that Reuven Ben Nevat did when he became king, so let's say Reuven Ben Nevat started out as a tzaddik, but unfortunately everything kind of descended into chaos when his leadership became about preserving his kavod. Reuven Ben Nevat was afraid that he would lose his monarchy when people would go ahead and be Ola Regel. There's only one Beis HaMikdash, right? So the Ola Regel to Yerushalayim, which is in Malchus Yehuda, it's only a matter of time until they pledge their allegiance to the Davidic king, and he loses his monarchy. So what did he do? He set up golden calves, right? He set up golden calves, and he said to essentially to his kingdom, you don't have to go to Yerushalayim, you could worship right here. So what did Aviyah, his son, do? There's a machlokes. Some say that Aviyah, and by the way, he also posted guards. He posted guards by the borders of his kingdom, not allowing people to go ahead and go up and to be Ola Regel. So what did this boy, Avia, what did he do? What was his accomplishment? So two interpretations. One interpretation says that he was one of the guards. He left his post and he went up to Yerushalayim. And the other opinion says that no, he went ahead and he took away the sentries that his father had posted, thereby allowing the Jews to freely be Ola Regel. Incredible. Na'ana Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah va'amar. Supposed to say next is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He's giving words of comfort to Rabbi Shmuel va'amar. B'shalom Thomas. U'b'misrafos avosecha hamalachim harishonim shahayu lefanecha yisrafu lecha. V'alo dvarim kavachomer. So we'll say, what's the kavachomer? Umad Sidkiyahu melech Yehud shelo asa ela mitzvah achas. We'll say Tzidkiyahu, who was the king of Yehuda, did only one good mitzvah. What was the one good mitzvah? Shehela Yirmiyahu minatit. Ultimately, again, Yirmiyahu Hanavi was stuck, right? Was literally stuck. And Tzidkiyahu extricated him from the mortar, right? Extricated him from the tit. So the Gemara says, Kach banav shara bishwa lachas kama v'kama. So we'll say Tzidkiyahu, who unfortunately did many bad things, but did one good thing, and as a result was given the bracha of b'shalom tamos, that you will die in peace. If he's given the bracha for one good act in Rabbi Shmuel, how much more so your sons, who led pious and virtuous lives, will be rewarded as well. Rabbi say last comforter Rabbi Akiva. Na'ana Rabbi Akiva va'amar bayomahu. On that day, Yigdal hamisped b'Yerushalayim kemisped hadadrimon bebikas Megiddo. But say, if you remember again, we had this Gemara already. We had this Gemara Mesachas Megillah, or Mesachas Tainis. So the Gemara says, on that day, there will be a great eulogy in Yerushalayim, like the eulogy of Hadadrimon. It was Hadadrimon ben Tavrimon, in the valley of Megiddo. Va'amar Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef says, Ilmale targume dahaikra lo haviyadana mai ka'amar. Rav Yosef says, were it not for the explanation of this pasuk, we would have absolutely no idea what it's talking about, right? We'll say, because remember again, the pasuk in Zechariah, we don't know who Hadadrimon ben Tavrimon is. So the Gemara says, sorry, Yosef, we're not for the explanation of that pasuk. Lo yidana mai kamar be'ednahu yiske mispeda b'Yerushalayim ke mispeda da'achav ben Amri. In that time, but remember we had this Gemara, and the Gemara explained what is this referring to? This is referring to the levaya of the Yetzer Hara. Right? The Mashiach comes, the Yetzer Hara is going to be slaughtered, and there's going to be a levaya for the Yetzer Hara. And the levaya for the Yetzer Hara is going to be as great as the levaya for Achav ben Amri, King Achav, who unfortunately again was so close to doing tshuva so many times in his life, but yet failed to launch. Never actually did tshuva. So the levaya for the Yetzer Hara is going to be as great as the levaya of Achav ben Amri, the Kasav Yaseh Hadadrimon ben Tavrimon, who was killed by Hadadrimon ben Tavrimon, ukimisped Yoshia bar Amon, the Katal Yaseh Paruch Hagira bebikas Megiddo, and will be as great as the levaya of Yoshia bar Amon ben Amon, who was killed by Paro. Followed Varm Kavachomer, and everyone says the Kavachomer, Uma Achav Melech Yisrael Shelo Asa Ela Davar Echad Tov. Achav, who only did one good thing in his life, Tichsiv v'Hamelech Haya Ma'amad b'Merkava Nochach Aram. Supposed to listen to this. Achav did one good thing in his life. I will say this is incredible. What was the one good thing that Achav did? Listen to this. The pasuk is quoting over here. The king stood strong in his chariot opposite Aram. Rabbi said this is actually an incredible story. So Achav is leading the army, the Jewish army, against Aram. They're being defeated. So Achav has been mortally wounded. He refused to lay down. He stood tall in his chariot because he understood that if people would see that the king was mortally wounded, what would happen? They would give up. So Achav was really an incredible thing, an incredible display of leadership. Despite the fact that he was going to die as a result of his wounds, summoned up all of his strength to remain standing in his chariot so that the people would see him as a beacon of strength, not knowing what happened to him, and continue forward in the battle. It's incredible. And we'll say, otherwise, he was a pretty bad guy. Right? Otherwise, he did some really bad stuff. But yet, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognizes the one good thing that he did. All the more so, ultimately, again, the sons of Rabbi Yishmael, how much they accomplished. Rabosai, you see that all of the Rabbanim who came in all offered the same theme of consolation. Rabbi Yishmael, your children's lives may have been short, but look how much they accomplished. Because look how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives credit when you accomplish but one good thing in your life. And your children, alachas kama v'kama, how much good they accomplished. Pretty incredible. Amali Rava l'Rama bar Mori. Ksivi v'tzidkio, b'shalom Thomas. Rabbi say it says, ultimately again by tzidkio, b'shalom Thomas, that he'll die in a state of peace. But it also says, ve'es einei tzidkio iver. So Rabbi say, remember again, Tzidkio was the king who was taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. Right, so right before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. So what happens? So it says Tzidkio was told that he's going to die in peace. But then it also says that Tzidkio was blinded, actively, it's not a metaphor, right, actually blinded by Nebuchadnezzar. So what's the pshat? So we'll say, how is that a death in peace? So it's that Nebuchadnezzar predeceased Tzidkio. So Tzidkio had the satisfaction of seeing Nebuchadnezzar die during his lifetime. That's what it means, B'shalom Thomas Nafshi. Or B'shalom Thomas, I should say. V'amar Rava l'Rabba bar Mori. Rava said to Rabba bar Mori, Ksive b'Yoshio, lochein hineni osivcha alavosecha, v'ne'asafta el kavurasecha b'shalom. So we'll say, it says by Yoshio, that ultimately I will collect you onto your forefathers, and you'll die b'shalom. So he was guaranteeing that he'll die b'shalom. Uksiv, vayoru hayor l'melech Yoshio. And we'll say the pasuk says that when Yoshio goes out to battle against Paro, we'll say he was killed by the arrows of the enemy. And not only was he killed by the arrows of the enemy, but Amarav Yehuda Amarav Shaosel Kikavra. It will say Yoshio's body was pierced by so many arrows that he became like a sieve. So how is that a death b'shalom when you die through so many arrows? It will say what it means is not that Yoshio's death was a peaceful one. His death was a violent one. But the idea of shalom that Hashem said was that Yoshio did not have to witness the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. That he left this world with the Beis Hamikdash still standing. He did not have to see the destruction. Rabbi Yochanan. So I'll say back to some halacha, really fascinating halacha. Rabbi Yochanan. Ein Menachem Rishon lomar davar ad shiftach Allah. So we'll say this halacha is a perfect segue from this story. Because remember again, all of the Rabbanim were coming in to comfort Rabbi Yishmael. And no one begins to talk until Rabbi Yishmael first says something. And Rabbi Yochanan says that is why, because ultimately, again, we don't go ahead and issue or utter any words of consolation until the Avel speaks. Shneimar, Acharei Kain, Pasa, Iyov Espiu, Vahadar, Vayaan Elifaz Hatemari. We'll say from Sefer Iyov, of course, is in mourning for his children, for everything he lost. And the pasuk says, Iyov said something, and then only afterwards did his friend Eliphaz say something as well. We'll say that's the halacha. So Rabbi Aval says, Minayin la'avel shemesiv berosh. How do we know that an avel literally sits at the head of the table? And I will say that interestingly enough, mesav literally means reclining, right? So at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily in this case have to mean reclining, because with pashtos, the avel doesn't recline while he eats. The important thing to see from this Gemara, as Rabbi Avo is saying, is that let's say there are a bunch of people eating at the Beis Avel, right? It's a mourner's home. How do we know that the mourner sits at the head of the table? Shneimar, Evchar Darkom, Va'ashev Rosh, Ve'eshkon Kimelech, Begidud kasher avelim yinachim. So I'll say ultimately again it says I will choose their path, I will seat them at the front, they will dwell with the king in the group like avelim. So I'll say so the idea that the Gemara is extracting from is that the avel kind of sits like the king. Just like the king sits at the head of the table, so too the avel sits at the head of the table. The Gemara says yinachim. Yinachim achrini mashma. We'll say Yinachim sounds like it's referring not to the mourner, but those who come to console the mourner. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Yinachim ksiv. You read it as Yinochim, the one who they come to console. So we'll say it's an interesting halacha that if the Avel is that if there's a group of people eating in the base Avel, the Avel sits at the head of the table. We'll say so something very interesting on this Gemara. Do have to make sure to finish today. I'll say so. I saw quoted in the Sefer Mipnine Harav. So I'll say in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik, who said something very interesting. I'll read to you this part. He says over here as follows. So he quotes already this Gemara that Abel Meisev Barosh. So I'll say, so now listen to this. So the idea over here that you see from this Gemara is that you have to give kavod to an Avel. The idea of the Avel sitting at the head of the table is that the Avel gets kavod. Right? You have to give, so I'm not just there to console the Avel, but there's this comparison in this interesting way between the Avel and a Melech. Melech gets kavod, the Avel gets kavod. So Rabbi Soloveitchik said based on this, something very interesting. He says, can you do Nichum Avelim by telephone? Let's say I can't make it over to the base Avel. Can I call up the Avel and do Nichum Avelim by phone? By phone, right? Or right, COVID times also this came up, right? Can you now? Again, I'll say no one's disagreeing that it's a nice thing to do. The shaila is, can I fulfill the mitzvah of nichum avelim through this? So Rabbi Soloveitchik says something absolutely amazing. He says over here, he says that nira pashit she'ein ze mimidas derech eretz litvoa mimenu sheyakum mimkomo. So it says, this is very interesting. So Soloveitchik says that no one would say to a king, hey king, you have a phone call, come here and take the call. Right? So Soloveitchik says it's not mimidas derech eretz of a king to go ahead and summon the king to the phone. If you need to talk to the king, you come to the king. So Soloveitchik, now it sounds like from the way the Rav was writing, it's interesting, is that what was he referring to? So telephones with a cord. You'll Google it, right? If you know, I'm getting some quizzical expressions over here, right? Phones used to have cords, right? So it sounds like what they're describing over here, ultimately, again, is like, the phone rings, right? The phone rings in the kitchen. There's a cord. You have to tell the Avel, you have a phone call, come here. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, that's not mimidas derech eretz. The king doesn't go to anything. Everything comes to the king. So Rabbi Soloveitchik actually said that halacha l'maisa, one could not go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of nichum avelim with a phone call, because that is not in accordance with the kavod of the avel. Now, I think the truth is, based on what the Rav is saying today, especially again with cell phones, where you could somebody else could answer the phone, and bring it to the avel. It would seem that one would be able to fulfill the mitzvah in that way. Rav Moshe also discusses this, and Rav Moshe says something amazing. He says, this is incredible. There are two parts to the mitzvah of nichum avelim. Two parts to it. Right? I will say one part is the kavod you give to the living, and one part is the kavod you give to the dead. The kavod you give to the dead through nichum avelim is only accomplished through showing up in the shiva home. The comfort you give to the living could be accomplished even through a phone call. So Rav Moshe Paskins, interestingly enough, that you could fulfill nichum avelim through a phone call, but only one part of nichum avelim, only kavod to the living. But the kavod that is given to the dead is only experienced when one actually shows up in the shiva home. Quite fascinating. So the Gemara has more to talk about, but we have to go back there. Says the Gemara. Good. Good. Amar Nachman bar Yitzchak. Yinachim so fine. Marzutra Amar Mehacha Besar Merzach Seruchim Merzach Nasa Salas Seruchim. Good. Amar Char Bachanina Minayin L'Chasen Shemei Seberosh. Similarly, again, how do we know that a chasen sits at the head of the table? So we'll say it's a very interesting comparison over here, right? The avel is treated like a melech. The chasen is treated like a melech. Shnei Amar Ki chasen yechahin pe'er. Ma kohen brosh, because it compares a chasen to a kohen. Just like a kohen ultimately again sits at the head of the table, is given kavod. Af chasen barosh. Ultimately again, so too chasen sits at the head of the table as well. But kohen gufim minalan. How do you know that a kohen is afforded a heightened level of honor? Tistan Rabbi Shmuel v'kidashto. The pasuk says, "You shall sanctify the kohen. L'chal davar shebikdusha, liftoach rishon, levarich rishon, lital monei yafa rishon." What does it mean to v'kidashto, to sanctify the kohen? The kohen goes first for everything. He's given the first opportunity to bench. He goes through the door first. You offer him food first. So we'll say, isn't this incredible? So chasen is compared to a kohen. Avel is compared to a melech. And therefore everyone is given kavod. I will say it is quite fascinating. Why would an Avel be given kavod? Why would an Avel be given kavod? We'll say there is no greater moment where a person is open and receptive to growth and sees life for what it is than when a person is in Avelus. Right? There is an opportunity for unprecedented spiritual growth when a person is in Avelus. Because when a person experiences death of a loved one, all the things that we hide behind in life come down. And a person sees life and sees themselves for who and what they really are. And there is a moment there of such incredible introspective growth that a person like that is considered to be as important and as holy as the Melech. Incredible Yisod. Let's go back. The soul leaving the body is as difficult. Top of Chavtes. Kitzi pori b'fi aveshet. Like a knotted rope through a hole. So we'll say, so again, if you're trying to pull a rope with knots through a hole, it's a lot of effort. So we'll say, this is actually an incredible Gemara, because we just saw before, we saw in yesterday's daf, right, some of these great Rabbanim, when they came back to their colleagues, right, and described the process of death, we saw two explanations, right? One was like the removal of a hair from milk. The other one was like the little bit of the prick from giving blood. It didn't seem all that dramatic. Here the Gemara describes death. It's so turbulent, like the removal of the body from the soul is like pulling a knotted rope through a narrow hole. So we'll say, so how do you reconcile the two? So it could be that for tzaddikim, death is a non-abrasive experience. Death kind of happens smoothly, which we'll say is very interesting. Why? What's the pshat with the tension? What's the tension of death? The tension of death is the tension between the body and the soul, right? The body wants to stay here. The body likes olam hazeh. The soul wants to go back to olam haba. So Rabbi say, depending on what kind of person I am, determines the tension in death. If a person is a very earthly, material being, so the body refuses to let go of the soul. If my life is about gashmias, then the body does not want the soul to leave, because this is what life is all about. That's where death becomes this intense tug of war. But if a person is primarily ruchni, if a person has cultivated an identity of spirituality, an identity of holiness, where the essence of my persona is my neshama, is my ruchnius, then death is a much less turbulent experience, because the body throughout life has been conditioned to be subservient to the soul. In other words, hear this, what the Gemara is saying is, think about, if I look at myself, who's the dominant force in my life, right? Is my body dominant over my soul, or is my soul dominant over my body? And I both say, when does this come to make a difference? This makes a difference in how I die. See, if my body is if my body is dominant over my soul, death is grueling, because the body will not let go, because the body is the dominant feature. And therefore, again, it's like pulling the knotted rope through the holes. But at the end of the day, if it's the soul that's dominant, then at the end of the day, the body is willing to let go, because the body has always been secondary to the soul. Incredible Gemara. So the Gemara is Rabbi Yochanan says, Kiptiri b'fi aveshet. Same idea. He says, like cables through the hole in a boat. Rashi says over Kitzipor b'fi aveshet, kechevel sheyesh bo kesher. Oh, it's the same idea of Yotzei Bekoshi Mina Toren. Shabbos says, so this is just the cable that keeps the pieces of the boat together. But the same idea. It's like ropes through a hole. Good. Rabbi Levi, I will say, incredible Gemara. Rabbi Levi bar Chissa, Hanifta min ames, lo yomar lo lech lishalom, ela lech bishalom. I will say, this is an incredibly important yesod. The Gemara says, when you go ahead and you depart from someone who has died, the greeting you give greeting. So the words you say to a person who has passed away is lech lishalom. Go to peace. Right? Go to peace. Rabbi Gemara says, "Haniftar min achai lo yomar lo lech bishalom." I'm sorry, just the opposite. Lo yomar lo lech lishalom ela lech bishalom. So when a person takes leave of the dead, he doesn't say lech lishalom. Rather, he says lech bishalom. Don't go to peace, but rather ultimately again go in peace. Haniftar min achai, person who takes leave of the living, lo yomar lo lech bishalom ela lech lishalom. Ultimately, again, when a person takes leave of the living, he doesn't say go in peace, but rather he says go two-piece. Haniftra min ameis lo yomer lo leich. We'll explain in just a moment. Haniftra min ameis lo yomer lo leich lishalom el leich bishalom shene'emar va'ato tovo el avosecha bishalom. Because I will say ultimately again when HaKadosh Baruch Hu describes Avram Avinu, then what's going to happen? You will go to your forefathers bishalom. So death is described, right? Death is described ultimately again bishalom. Go in peace. So the Gemara says, bishalom. But when you take leave of the living, you don't say lech bishalom. Not go in peace, but rather go to peace. Shari David Shamar li Avshalom leich bishalom halach v'nitla. David HaMelech accidentally used the wrong words with his son Avshalom. He said to Avshalom leich bishalom. He should have said leich lishalom, and Avshalom ends up getting killed. Not that the Gemara is saying that David HaMelech is responsible for his son's death, but ultimately, again, that David HaMelech's words were a metaphoric foreshadow for the fact that Avshalom was not going to live. So we'll say, what's the distinction between Leich Lishalom and Leich Bishalom? We'll say this is incredibly beautiful. So the Nemuki Yosef explains on this. He says something beautiful. He says, Ki TORAH Shalom, listen to these words, Ki TORAH Shalom, Hu gam kinui ashlemos hanefesh. So we'll say the word Shalom is also, that we translate Shalom as peace. But Shalom also means Shalim. Shalim, to be complete. So Lachem biyos ha'adam b'chayim omid hu lahosif Torah u'mitzos lahashem es nafsho. When a person is alive, he's not Shalim, he's not Shalom, he's not complete. Right? Who's ever complete? There's always more to learn. There's always more chesed to do. There's always something to fix. Therefore again, b'tzedek omna niftarim lecha mimenu lecha leich lishalom. So both say, when you take leave of someone who's living, what's the proper way to say goodbye? Leich lishlam. You give them a bracha. What's the bracha? I hope you find shleimos. The beautiful bracha. I hope you find completion in life. Right? You're not complete. I'm not complete. Leich lishalom. I hope you find shleimos. I hope you learn more. I hope you do more. Hope you accomplish more. Hope you become more. I give you the bracha. I give you the bracha of shalom. I give you the bracha of shleimos. Masha Enkin says in the Mukhe Yosef, but when a person dies, both say death is the end of the road. Right? Whatever you've done, you've done. Right? Whatever you've accomplished. And therefore again, what do we say to the dead? Lech bishalom. Go on to eternity now with whatever shleimos you've accomplished. Go in the shleimos, in the completion that you've accomplished. Whatever you've accomplished. Balech bishalom. Go on to eternity in that state of shleimos that you have accomplished. So I will say, what an incredible yesod. That the bracha that we give to each other is leich lishalom. I hope that you find shleimos. I hope that you find completion in life. You tell me, I hope that you find completion. Because we'll say, what are we all looking for in this world? Think about it just a moment. What are we all looking for? We all, at the end of the day, I know that I'm deficient. What I'm looking for is to feel whole. The challenge in life is we often look for wholeness in all the wrong places, right? As they say, right? Right? We go out and we look for shleimos, right? In other words, we're all, and you see this in the world all the time. I'm looking to be whole. I'm looking for shalom. I'm looking for shleimos. But sometimes I try to fill that hole. I try to fill that void with all the wrong things. So the bracha you give to the living is leich le shalom. But the scariest part of death is that when you die, whatever amount of shleimos you've accomplished, that's what you got. That's what you got. No more, no less. Leich bishalom, we say to the dead. I hope the shleimos that you accomplished over this lifetime is enough for you to subsist on for all eternity. Now go on to eternity in this shleimos. Yeah, it's incredible. So the Gemara goes back to Yisro Asham al Moshe Leich Lishalom Halach V'Etzliach. So Yisro said to Moshe Rabbeinu Leich Lishalom, and Moshe Rabbeinu went on and was Matzliach. I will say, isn't this an incredible Gemara? That the Gemara what does the Gemara attribute Moshe Rabbeinu's success to? What does it attribute his success to? To the bracha he got from the Shver. Right? His father-in-law gave him a bracha. So now really? Moshe Rabbeinu's success is because, right, Yisro says to Moshe, Leich Lishalom, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu is successful. We'll say, but you see something amazing over here. Take whatever brachas you can get in life. right? And even the bracha of an ordinary person is something so significant and something so meaningful. There's no such thing as when one Jew, or in this case, even one human being, gets a bracha from another human being, Rabbosai, that is special. Take it, because you never know whose brachas really means something in this world. Rabbosai, conclusion of Masechas Moed Katan. Conclusion. Rabbi Levi, listen to this Gemara. A person, who goes ahead and goes from the shul to the Beis Medrash, because also remember again, in times of the Gemara, you often had two different spaces. You had a Beis HaKnesses, which is where you davened, and a Beis HaMedrash, which is where you learned. So the Gemara describes over here a person who goes from davening to learning, from learning to davening. Zocha umekabel pnei shechina. Rabbi will be privileged to see the Shekhinah. Rabbi say, by the way, this doesn't just mean after 120. It doesn't mean the afterlife. Rabbi say, think about it. A person who goes from the Beis Medrash to the Beis HaKnesses, right? The person who does this, who spends his life going back and forth. Again, it doesn't mean all day. I have other things I have to do also. But a person who makes the Beis Medrash, the Beis HaKnesses, a fixture in his life, is zocha to see the Shekhinah. Rabbi say, it's not an esoteric bracha. Who's in the Beis Medrash? Who's in the Beis HaKnesses? The Ribono Shel Olam. So on every single day I show up to shul, every single day I show up to the Beis Medrash, I'm zocha to see the Shechina. Shene'amar yelchu michayil el chayil, yira el elokim b'tzion. So we'll say it's very interesting. You go from chayil el chayil. We'll say, now often when you hear people use this phrase, yelchu michayil el chayil, so we'll say, which again is the pasuk in Tehillim, yelchu michayil el chayil. We often think chayil means what? Right when you hear people say, you should go from chayil to chayil, what does it mean? Strength to strength. So the truth is, the real definition that the Gemara is using over here, chayil means a great assembly of people, multitudes. Yelchu mechayil el chayil. You'll go from one multitude to the other. The multitudes, of course, being a reference to the groups of people in the Beis Medrash, to the groups of people in the Beis HaKnesses. You should go from one multitude to another multitude. Now, of course, it means strength. Chayil also means like a chayal, like a soldier. It also does mean from strength to strength. But in the purest definition, it means from multitude to multitude. He who goes from multitude to multitude, from the Beis Medrash to the Beis HaKnesses, Yira el Elokim b'tzion. Ultimately, again, we'll see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi will say, what an incredible yisod. When we come, and we're zocha. Why are we zocha? We'll say, why are we zocha? We're zocha because we have one-stop shopping. Right? Why one-stop shopping? All your spiritual needs in one location. Right? Because our Beis HaKnesses and our Beis Medrash is one. So literally, again, we have the Chayil El Chayil in one address, in one location. So every single morning, every single evening, when I come to the Beis HaKnesses, I am literally, again, going Michayil El Chayil, and I have the privilege to see the Shechina. So we'll say, we think we come to learn. Who we sing? We're seeing each other. We're seeing Baruch Hashem, our beloved Gemara, but we don't realize that we're seeing the Shechina each and every day. And when we come to the Beis Medrash and to the Beis HaKnesses, wrapped up in one, we're literally going Mechayil Chayil. We'll say the Masechta ends. Listen to this Gemara. Amar Rav Chira Ashi Amarav. Talmidei Chachamim ein lahem menucha afilu li'olam haba. Talmidei Chachamim have no rest even in the world to come. Shne'emar yelchu michayil al chayil yira el elokim b'tzion. They go from chayil to chayil, from one multitude to another multitude, one group to another group. They'll see elokim b'tzion. Abba say, what does this mean that Talmidei Chachamim don't have any rest in this world? So Abba say, there's a beautiful gra. It's actually a gra Maseches Brachas, and the gra says this. Abba say, listen to this. Diva olam hazeh nikra ha'adam holech. We'll say in this world, a person is called a holech. Right? That's how a person is called. Why is a person called a holech? Because the objective of olam hazeh is constant halicha, constant growth, constant movement. I never stop. However, ava ba'olam haba nikra omeid. We'll say in the world to come, what is a person called? A person is called an omeid. Right? Why is a person called? But we'll say same idea. Lech lishalom, lech bishalom. In this world, I'm a holech. I always have to be growing. I always have to be doing. I always have to be accomplishing. I'm always leich lishalom. In olam haba, a person is an omeid. They're standing in place. Why? Because at the end of the day, leich bishalom. Right? At the end of the day, you have what you have. Whatever you accomplish in this world, that's it. Look what the Gra says. Aval yesh kama tzadikim shafilu be'olam habahim nikra mahalchim. There are some tzadikim at the end of the day who ultimately, again, in the world to come, are considered to be holchim as well. V'zu madrega gidola shein lamala himenu. So the Gra says, the Gemara is describing something absolutely amazing. Then I will say, listen to this Gemara, because this Gemara changes your life. You see, I will say, what's the scariest part of death? Let's be honest, we have a whole minute left. What's this? And this we're going to get to the essence of life. 1 minute. All right, so I'll say, so what's the scariest part of death? Scariest part of death is this? It's that you're done. It's not the fact that I'm not living anymore. Okay, there's an olam haba. It's that I can't accomplish. I will say, it's 6:45 already. Okay, I was going to say 6. It really was 6:44 just a moment ago. I will say, right, I have a whole day ahead of me. I can do whatever I want. I can be whatever I want. I can make of myself. Today could be the day that I affect all of the changes that I've been speaking about for years. I could do it today. And every day of life represents untold possibilities. When I die, that's it. That's it. That's the end. There's no more accomplishment. Says the Gra, it's not true. There are some tzaddikim who create lives that are focused on such growth in this world that Hashem gives them the gift of growth even in the world to come. I will say, isn't that the most incredible thing you've ever heard in your life? There are some people who make growth such a cornerstone of this world that Hashem gives them the gift of growth even in Olam Haba, even in the world to come. If you live a life of growth, Hashem will give you the gift of a death of growth as well. I will say, isn't that something to aspire to? Because how incredible would it be if my growth doesn't have to stop after 120? If there is a way to grow, and there is a way to become better, and there is a way to go mala, even in Olam Haba. I will say, there's more to say. There's a beautiful Belzer Rebbe, but we don't have time for it today. Maybe at the Siyum. I will say that is the last lesson of Maseches Moed Katan. A Masechta that focused us so much on death, and focused us on the idea that death is the end of the road. Death is the end of the road except for those who it's not the end of the road for. And if we live lives of incredible growth, if we live growth-focused lives, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees how much we want halicha, we want growth, we want lech l'shalom in this world, then He will give us the gift of growth, the gift of halicha, the lech l'shalom in Olam Haba as well. I will say, Mazel Tov on completing this Masechta. And Yahrzeit Hashem, plans for the Siyum will be forthcoming. We begin Maseches Chagiga tomorrow morning. B'Sha'a Tova U'Metlachas. It's going to be a magnificent journey. Maybe Zochem Yahrzeit Hashem for Halicha in this world and for Halicha in the world to come as well. Shigayach. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Great day.